Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Muscle. Today's episode will be another interview from the Muscle Media 2000 Audiotape series, and it'll be TC Luoma interviewing Peter Sisco and John Little about their new training program called Power Factor. All right, let's get to it.
From Golden, Colorado, in the foothills of the beautiful Rocky Mountains, comes Muscle Media 2000. TC Luoma, editor-in-chief of the magazine, seeks out the people and the subjects you find in Muscle Media 2000's audio tape series. At the end of this tape, we'll tell you how to reach Muscle Media 2000. Now, though, let's get on with it. Here's your host, TC.
Hi, this is TC Luoma, and this month we're going to be talking to two guys that aren't exactly household names in the world of bodybuilding, but they've come out with a revolutionary bodybuilding program called Power Factor Training. It's advertised as being the future of strength training, but is it just another in a long series of training programs that elicit false hopes? I don't know. Hopefully we'll find out during this interview. I will add, though, that the program has received the blessing of Mike Mentzer, and that says a lot. Okay, first of all, let me introduce our guests. They're Pete Sisco and John Little. Why don't you guys both tell me a little bit about your backgrounds? Pete, why don't you start?
My background as it relates to Power Factor training, my inputs on Power Factor training mainly come from a physics and math background. That's the analysis that I gave to the whole process of lifting weights to gain strength. I look at the physics involved and the associated mathematics. That's what I studied when I went to college, and that's what I applied to the whole task at hand of moving weight so that you could make yourself stronger. John's really the guy with the background in bodybuilding proper.
Yeah, well, that basically consists of probably about 16 years worth of poring over research papers and interviewing bodybuilders, not unlike yourself, TC, where you sort of know these people and interview them and hang out with them, work out with them occasionally, and when you do that often enough, you get a feel for where they're coming from. And then what I've done is just contrasted that with sort of the cold reality of science in some respects.
So how did you guys hook up together?
Well, the truth is, Pete and I grew up together. Our parents had cottages in the same lake, so we've known each other pretty much all our lives.
Oh, you're both Canadians, huh?
Both Canadians, that's right.
What part of Canada?
Well, Pete was we're both from Ontario, but two different towns. One was Markham, the other was Agincourt originally.
Okay, great. Now, all right, how did you come up with this whole concept of Power Factor training? Were you having a couple beers at the bar and you decided on this concept, or what?
Well, really, the genesis of the thing occurred a couple of years ago when John and I ended up, after many years, sort of living close enough together that we could start working out together. And it started as really a simple project of let's keep track of our workouts. Let's see what works and what doesn't, and maybe John could get an article out of it. And that's kind of how we started. What we did was every workout that we performed, we kept meticulous records of the weights we were lifting, how many reps, how many sets, the time that it took to lift the weights, the time of rest in between the workouts. Also the time of the whole workout. Every component was recorded.
So it's pretty much trial and error type stuff? It was trial and error type stuff?
Well, here's what happened. After we had, I began to analyze that data as we went along and found a relationship between the amount of weight we were lifting and the time it was taking to lift it. When you divide those two numbers, you come out with a pounds per minute measurement. That measurement we called a power factor. So what happened was we started to concentrate on that number, recognizing that it was a measurement of intensity. The pounds per minute that you're lifting is an accurate measurement of the intensity of your lifting effort. So we tried to find ways to increase that. And when we did, we found very consistent results. And it led us, John did quite extensive research on this whole subject of what exactly is required to induce muscular hypertrophy. And John can probably tell you a bit about that.
Yeah, well, basically what I did is went back over the physiology journals and the textbooks, and in some cases going back to the turn of the century. And there was a reason for doing that, which I'll probably you'll bring up later. But what we found out was that the physiologists said that hypertrophy, that is an increase in muscular tissue size, is induced by one thing and one thing only, and that is the increased amount of work that muscle is made to perform within a given unit of time. And it may sound complex, but it's really not. I mean, when you think about it, a marathoner, as you may recall, Mike Metz used to say, can go on for miles and miles and miles. They have very little in the way of musculature or muscle mass to show for it. The sprinter, on the other hand, has the bigger legs, simply because he's packed a lot more work, muscular work, within a unit of time than the marathoner. By the same token, with weight training, if you do more work in that unit of time, if you have your muscles contract against heavier weights more frequently, you do more reps with it, then your muscles will adapt by getting bigger and stronger. It's progressive overload, essentially, but it's been empirically validated by, physiologists from Marpurgo to present day.
Well, how does this equate to a regular workout in the gym? Pounds per minute. Give me an example.
Yeah, in an example on that, Pete had mentioned that he kept track of time and sets and reps and weight, and that's basically all you're doing. For example, if you do a bench press and you do, as an example, you do 10 sets or 10 repetitions with 200 pounds, that's 2,000 pounds that you have lifted, or 200 pounds 10 times. Mm-hmm. Now you divide that by the time taken to perform that, and you get a pounds per minute or a power factor. What the upshoot of that is that number, that final number you get, is your guide mark at the end of a workout. That's what you have to beat next time. If you do beat it, you know you've stimulated growth, and you know you've gotten bigger and stronger than you were previously. If you don't beat it, then that suggests one of several things: either that you haven't recovered between your last workout, or that the stimulus from your previous workout wasn't intense enough to stimulate an adaptive response and result in hypertrophy.
Now, how do I beat my record? Is it by doing more reps in a given amount of time, or increasing the weight, or both? And if so, how do I determine?
Yeah, that's an astute question, TC. And the fact of the matter is that there are three different components that have to be balanced against each other. There's the amount of weight you're going to lift, how much you're going to put on a bar. Say it's a bench press, you put 200 pounds on the bar. Then you can get so many repetitions per set. And what you have to find is the correct combination of the weight you're lifting, the number of reps you can get, and the number of sets you can get until you've gone to complete failure. So, that's why, we see these sort of cookie-cutter routines that are common in bodybuilding. Sort of, on your mass days, you want to do 4 sets of 6. Other times you're going to do 3 sets of 10. Those can't possibly be accurate for anything close to the majority of the population. I mean, 3 sets of 10, it may work for 10 or 12% of the people. Other people are going to be able to develop their highest power factor with some different combination. And there's some experimentation that has to take place in the early stages. So each person can identify where on that spectrum his best power factor can be generated. When I say the spectrum, there's kind of two ends of that if you think about it. You could go into the gym, again using the bench press as an example, and say your maximum weight you can lift, 1 rep max is 300 pounds. You could take that 300 pounds and just lift it one time. 1 rep, that's all you can get. In a minute, it takes everything out of you. 1 rep, boom, you're done. And then just go home. You're finished. That's your bench press routine for the day. That's one end of the spectrum. 1 maximum rep, then you're done. The other end of that same spectrum is take a very lightweight, maybe 10 pounds, and just hammer away with it and get 400, 500, 600 repetitions before you go to failure. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens at both ends of that scale is if you take the amount of weight you lifted, in the first case 300 pounds, and divide it by the minute you took, your power factor is 300 pounds per minute. That's all you lifted in the minute. Mm-hmm. At the other end, say you lifted 10 pounds 1,000 times. Well, then you lifted 10,000 pounds, that's good. But maybe it took you 100 minutes to do it. Well, 10,000 pounds, if it took 100 minutes, is, 100 pounds a minute? So that's also a very low power factor. Mm-hmm. It's more like the marathoner. It's a fair amount of work. You lifted 10,000 pounds, but it took you a long time to do it. The point is that somewhere along that scale, there's this sweet spot where you can lift the maximum power factor possible for you. And using the same example, the guy who can do 300 pounds, maybe if he dropped it down to 185 or 225, and he can get 6 sets of 30 repetitions, well, he's going to have a power factor that's very high, maybe 6, 7, 8,000 pounds per minute. Well, that's where he should be exercising. That's the capacity that his muscles have to do that work. You know, if in physics, if you were trying to get that work done with an engine, you know, you'd need a more powerful engine. You need a more powerful engine to lift 7,000 pounds per minute than you do to lift 300 pounds per minute.
Okay, now if I was going to go to the gym and I was going to start this routine, let's say we're doing bench, what weight? I mean, how would I arrive at the weight I was to begin with?
Well, Pete had mentioned that it's probably you got to do some experimentation, but a good rule of thumb is whatever your maximum weight is, whatever your top weight is that you train with now, for example, for 8 reps full range, let's assume on the bench press you can bang out 8 reps with 225 pounds as an example.
Okay.
Well, what you're probably going to find is that in your strongest range, which is the last 2 to 3 inches of extension on a bench press, you can do that 225 for probably 50 reps. So rather than do that, unless that yields you your highest power factor, what you might do is up the weight a bit. Maybe you go to 250, maybe you'll go to 315 pounds, and you'll try for 15 to 20 reps. Okay, you do that, you perform 3 to 4 sets, take as much rest as you feel you need in order to perform efficiently.
And you keep the clock running while you rest.
Exactly. You keep the clock running, you keep track of the total amount of weight you've lifted, the amount of repetitions you performed with it in sets, which is basically the same thing, and then you divide it by the time you took. That gives you your starting point. And the next workout you come in, you say, okay, for example, I did 6,000 pounds a minute was my power factor. Now, if I want to stimulate growth or an adaptive response, I have to better that. I can't, if I put on 400 pounds and I only get 10 reps on each of my sets, then that number is going to decrease, actually. It's not going to increase, which means that your muscular output has diminished. So with an eye toward increased work or muscular output in a unit of time being the clinical formula for muscle growth, you've got to better that performance every time you hit the gym. So if you did it with 6 sets of whatever I said the repetitions were with that 315, you've got to go more reps or more sets or a heavier weight for the same amount of reps or the same work in a shorter span of time. If you do that, then your muscles will have done more work in a unit of time and will have gotten bigger and stronger as a result of it.
So, and what ends up happening, TC, is after you've done just even 3 or 4 power factor workouts, with your focus on what's my power factor, what's the rate of lifting I'm doing in a unit of time. Once that's your focus, you tend not to pay too much attention to what your maximum weight is and things like that, because that what's important to you is shooting for that total output. And there's a freedom to experiment around and try adding an extra set and cutting the reps back. See what happens. Add a few more reps to each set. See what happens. Lighten up the weight. Heavy up the weight. And you've got instant feedback that's going to tell you, hey, you know what? I went the wrong direction on that. That wasn't more productive. That was less productive.
So I'm in the gym. I assume I have some sort of stopwatch or the clock on the wall. I have a logbook, and I'm doing these calculations. Are these calculations difficult for the math impaired, or?
No, it's grade 6 arithmetic for the most part.
Okay.
That's what it's been simmered down to.
Okay.
For example, if you do 6 sets of 10, that's 60 repetitions. If you do that with 200 pounds, that's 12,000 pounds that you lift.
Okay, I see. Okay.
And then if you have some other sets with different weights, you add that on, and you end up with total weight in your bench press of, say, 20,000 pounds. And it took you 10 minutes to do that, so you lifted 4,000 pounds per minute. It's just dividing.
Okay.
Total weight divided by the time.
Okay. How about the number of exercises? Would I be doing several exercises using this method, or?
Well, no. Here's the thing, and this is where it gets interesting. Again, remember that what we just touched upon about increased work in a unit of time and the significance of the power factor. Now, picture this: you get a guy who goes into a gym to perform his chest routine. Right? He's going to start with about 4 sets of benches to get things rolling. He'll do probably 1 set of 15 with 135, a second set of 10 at 155, maybe a set of 8 with 175, and finally, he'll tap out with 3 reps at 200 pounds. Then, typically the guy will go on to 4 sets of incline presses using, 105 pounds for 12 reps, 135 for 10, 145 for 9. Maybe he'll finish with 155 for 8 reps. From there, he's still not finished. This is a conventional bodybuilder. He'll go into dumbbell flies for 3 sets of 12 reps with a pair of 45-pound dumbbells. Typically, a workout like that would take the guy about 30 minutes to complete, and it's the kind of thing you see going on a daily basis in almost any gym you go into. Well, on the other hand, let's say a guy goes into a gym to also work his chest, and he selects just one exercise, just regular bench presses. He bangs out 6 sets of 30 reps with only 155 pounds in a span of 10 minutes. Well, the question then becomes, which guy stimulated the more muscle growth? And more importantly, how do you know? Well, the only way to answer this question lies not in feel or instinct, or holistic training. Muscle growth, as we've touched on, can only be stimulated by having your muscles perform more work or lift more weight for more reps over a given unit of time than they did previously. As there's no other considerations in this equation, if your muscles perform more work, then growth is being stimulated. If they haven't, not only has growth not been stimulated, but the indications are that you haven't even recovered from your previous workout, and you probably benefit from putting off your workout for another few days. But still, back to the question, which of the two workouts stimulated the greater muscle growth? The answer lies in computing the power factor. And the power factor is determined by dividing the total weight lifted by the total time of the workout itself. So the more weight lifted on a pounds per minute basis, the greater the power factor, and hence the greater the muscle growth stimulation. So here's how you'd find out which one was better. Workout 1, you had bench presses, 1 set of 15 reps with 135 is 2,025 pounds total weight lifted. The second set was, I think it was 10, 155, go on and on and on. But anyway, to save you the math on that, the overall total weight lifted in that workout of the conventional 3-exercise guy was 13,970 pounds. And you can check that out for yourself just by rewinding this tape and shooting my math. But if you take the time it took to perform it, which I said was about 30 minutes, the power factor for that fellow was 465.6 pounds per minute, which was the total weight divided by the total time. By contrast, the total weight lifted by the guy that just did the bench presses was 27,900 pounds. He did 10 minutes to complete that. His power factor was 2,790 pounds a minute. So there's your answer in black and white. The second workout stimulated far more muscle growth. In every single aspect, workout 2 was more productive. It exceeded the total weight lifted of the first workout by almost double the amount of muscular output. That is 27,900 pounds versus 13,970 pounds. And more importantly, the power factor was a staggering 2,324 pounds a minute higher than the first workout. So when you make your muscles move that much more weight over a given unit of time, there's an incredible demand imposed on the muscles and the system that supply them. And because of the magnitude of this demand, your body increases its muscle mass to guard against future stress caused by lifting this much weight in the future. So it won't tax the body as severely. So perhaps that's a very long-winded explanation, but I think it underscores why keeping these records in time is so important, because on the surface, that first workout where the guy's doing 3 different exercises, he's working to failure probably on most of the sets, is generating far less muscular output. His muscles are doing less work than the second guy who just came in and did 6 sets.
Okay, well, how often would I do this chest workout then?
Well, that again is going to depend on sort of your innate recovery ability. Some people can go in the gym maybe twice a week or 3 times a week, but we found with power factor training that you split the body in half, and you start out on a 3-day-a-week schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, alternating. And at the end of 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to find that your numbers are going to flatline because you need more recovery time. Your weights are going to go up so quickly that your body just doesn't have time to adapt and get stronger unless you give it more time. So then your workouts will diminish to twice a week, to once a week. At one point, I mean, Pete and I are just training once a week now, but at one point we took a 6-week layoff and came back, and all our strength records went up. We set personal strength records.
Is that right? Now you're doing the whole body in one day now?
No, we just train half the body. Each
I see.
gets trained twice a month.
You're kidding?
Yeah, so when we say, 1 workout a week, that's for half the body. So you're not going to get back to those body parts for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Now, that's after you reach a certain, level of strength, and it's going to vary between individuals. But what you're bringing up is an interesting point, and it's one that really doesn't get much analysis. After you perform a workout, your body has to recover from the workout. You've stimulated the growth by doing the workout. That's the whole idea going in the gym. You're going to increase that overload a bit from the last time, stimulate growth as an adaptive response. Then you've got the first thing your body's going to do is recover from that workout, and then the growth will take place. Only in that order will it occur. You stimulate, you recover, you grow. Now, when to go back in the gym can be measured along a spectrum again. And for those people who have a lot to do and they got a family life and things like that, and they're going in the gym, excuse me, to stay in shape, but not necessarily as a hobby. Their question is going to be, look, how long can I stay out of the gym and not see any atrophy? How long can I wait? Do I have to go back next Wednesday, or could I wait till Friday? Well, with power factor training, you're going to be able to measure that. You're going to be able to say, because you have an exact analysis of each workout, you're going to have a way of measuring whether or not you waited too long. So you could go 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 9 days, and when you go too far and there's been some decompensation take place, you'll find that, oh boy, I waited too long. I didn't even get as high a power factor as I did last time. I'm not as strong. I'm not as strong as I was last time I worked out.
Right.
Now, on the other end of that scale is the guy who wants to be in the gym. He likes it. He wants to be there. Well, now he's going to have a way of measuring what day is the soonest he can come back and get a productive workout. Instead of 4 days, can I do it in 3 days? Can I do it in 2.5 days? And he can keep pushing that envelope the other way to find out how soon he can get back in the gym and have another productive workout where his numbers go up.
That's a nice thing because it removes all the guesswork on it. Like a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to go in 4 days a week, rain or shine. But these are the same guys that are spinning their wheels. You see them in the gym day in, day out. Their weights are all the same. Their physique looks exactly the same. There's no progress. What we've noted with power factor training is that progress is substantial. It's not like, you get a 2% increase here or you get another rep on your bench press. It's on the order of like 30 to 40% per workout, per muscle group. So that's significant, and the only reason that occurs is because you allow it to occur by not going into the gym and digging a deeper hole to climb out of it.
Gotcha.
And I should add that we don't want to take anything away from the mental resolve that these people have. You see the guys like John's talking about, the guys who do 4 different exercises for their chest. They've got the mental discipline to do that. They go to failure. Their muscles are killing them when they're finished. They've got a very intense drive to complete those exercises. They're trying hard. Same thing with the guy who's going into the gym 3 days a week and he's not making progress, and he says, well, damn it, I'll go in 4 days a week. I'll go in 5. I'll go in 7 days a week if I have to. And TC, you and I both probably know people who go in twice a day into the gym to work out. That takes a mental discipline that is admirable, but the fact is it won't increase your growth of muscle. It can't, because your body is constantly trying to recover from the last workouts, and they actually end up digging a well deeper and deeper every time they sort of redouble their efforts.
Okay.
Damn it, I'm going to go in and work out even harder.
Right. Is there ever a period?
That's the problem. Now, if they were power factor training, those guys would see it instantly in their numbers. They'd say, Jesus, my numbers are going down. Last week I did my bench press routine and I did 1,100 pounds a minute. This week I did 700 pounds a minute, and I'm beat.
I see.
I couldn't get another rep. What's wrong? I can't believe it.
Right. Okay. Is there ever a point where you'd enter a period where you use lighter weight or you take some time off, or what's otherwise known as periodization? Or...
You're gonna open that up, huh?
No, there's absolutely. What we view it as, periodization in essence is what it consists of is mixing productive workouts in with unproductive workouts. If, as we said, if increased work in a unit of time is the trigger for muscle growth, that's what you have to do to stimulate muscle growth. To our perspective, there's no justification for doing a workout that doesn't involve an increased work in a unit of time, because that takes you away from your goal.
So let me run this by you. Okay, functional overload is theorized to cause fibers to behave more like slow muscle fibers, which in turn have a higher threshold to recruitment. So doesn't it make sense that at some point these highly resistant to recruitment slow muscle fibers need a period to revert back to their more easily recruitable selves?
Well, to me, a lot of that is academic gymnastics. It's probably true that maybe that's the case. They'll recover a bit, but certainly they'd recover if you just backed off out of the gym and let them do their job. Let biology run its course. If you go into the gym, it's like, again, look at the analogy of the fact that when you train, you're creating an energy debt. No matter what type of training you do, whether it's walking to the post office or lifting a barbell, a certain amount of energy is required to accomplish those tasks. Well, you do a maximum. We're not talking about a full range exercise, which is weak range, where you're using a moderate weight and you go to failure in your weak range. We're talking about heavy maximal overload, the most weight you're capable of lifting in your strongest position. you're running up an enormous energy debt with that, and that is why the adaptive response is so quick. Now, when you do that, the last thing in the world you need is to go back in the gym and do essentially a half-assed workout where all you're going to be doing is running the energy clock again and creating a bigger hole. Now, let's grant the premise. Let's say that what you're saying is completely valid, and there's some fibers that can revert back to this and that. I'm not sure that in the final analysis, after 12 months of training, that those little fibers that you went into the gym all that extra time for are going to result in even a pound's worth of muscle growth.
Fair enough. Okay.
And the other thing we want to address, too, and now that you've brought it up, is the fact that periodization is predicated solely on drug cycles, and no one seems to be willing to go into this issue, for obvious reasons. There's a certain commercial bias that runs, throughout almost every publication in the trade, and some of them embrace periodization. And the truth is that periodization started with the Russian weightlifters, and it was made, this cycling of heavy and light workouts through the course of a year was meant to coincide with their drug cycles. So, when you're on the juice and you're stronger, it naturally makes sense that you're going to have more in the tank and you can lift heavier weights and you can engage in it for a longer period. But then when you taper off the drugs, you just don't have that kind of power. You don't have the recovery ability and you don't have the strength. So you got to taper the training down to match it. So there's periods of heavy training and periods of light training to go with periods of drug intake mixed with periods of non-drug intake.
Okay.
So, the thing is, if you're a clean bodybuilder, assuming such animals still exist, the last thing in the world you want is to be following a program that was predicated on someone's drug cycles if you're not taking the drug.
I understand. Now, what about, would it be prudent to change exercises once in a while because certain neural pathways become more efficient at that particular angle or movement or whatever?
Well, you see, the thing is that it's true, neural pathways do become more efficient, and that is actually a boon. It's not a malfactor, because what happens is that, as you know, if you start an exercise you're unfamiliar with, you can get really great progress for about the first couple of weeks as the neuromuscular pathways are improved upon. Yeah, that means they can recruit more fibers. It makes the job a little bit easier for you to lift that weight. Well, if you do that exercise often enough, all those neural pathways are developed or opened up maximally so that all the fibers are capable of recruiting are being recruited. And when you consider that it's the amount of weight that recruits the muscle fibers, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to use a very heavy weight, which means you're going to be recruiting a lot of fibers, which means a lot of fibers are going to get stimulated, which means you're going to be inducing optimal growth stimulation. Now, the problem is if you say, well, I'm getting kind of tired of that, I'm going to switch to dumbbell flies, well, number one, your power factor is going to just bottom out because there's no comparison with a 50-pound dumbbell and a 400-pound bench press. And then you've got to redevelop those neural pathways again. So you're going to be in a holding pattern for a couple of weeks until those build up. But more to the point, if you're allowing adequate recovery and growth, and I remember as Pete said, it's triphasic, you stimulate, recover, grow, there's no need to. You'll find that people tend to change exercises mainly out of mental boredom. Yeah, geez, man, I don't want to go in there and do that bench press again. It's the last thing in the world's going to entice me to get into a gym. Well, the reason they feel that is because that's overtraining. That's the first symptom of overtraining, is a mental disinclination to engage in work. But if you're not overtrained, you don't have that disinclination, so there's no real reason to change it. Okay.
Now, let's address this, perhaps the most controversial part of the programs, the partials. Now, let me bring up an everyday empirical piece of evidence. And obviously, the guy who goes in the gym the first time ever and starts training, let's say he's doing leg presses, if he's a little cocky, he might put on 1,000 pounds or something, and invariably he'll move the platform about 4 inches. And obviously, these are the guys that never make any progress. So why isn't what they're doing considered to be partials and to be efficient? And
well, yeah, I'm glad we got to this, because there's as power factor training becomes more and more popular. There's now athletes in 54 countries that are using it, incidentally. As it becomes more popular, people will say, oh, yeah, power factor training, I've heard about that. That's that system where you use strong-range partials. Yeah, maybe I'm going to give that a try. Well, if you just train with strong-range partials, you're just going to overtrain with those. Instead of overtraining with conventional methodology, you're just going to overtrain with strong-range partials. The reason we evolved towards the strong-range partials was this focus on the amount of work in a unit of time. That is the critical issue. That's the clinical formula for hypertrophy. amount of work in a unit of time. Well, the way to increase that is to operate in that strongest range exclusively, where you can lift the most weight in a unit of time. But you still have to have the clock running, and you still have to have an awareness of what the power factor is you're generating. And then you have to engineer your next workout to exceed the output that you generated last time. So if you say a guy will do partials and he never gets anywhere, that could happen, obviously, because for the same reason it happens to the guy who does a full range and never gets anywhere. If you're not mindful of your muscular output, you're just guessing.
Okay. All right, good. How about this? Does power factor training recognize the alleged importance of the eccentric component in building muscle size?
That's very interesting, and I was talking to some people about that the other day, and my perspective on that, and Pete's as well, is that you've seen a lot of documented literature. I think it first started to proliferate in the late 60s, early 70s with Arthur Jones and Nautilus, where they said we're getting tremendous results with people who are lifting or doing negative-only training. And negative-only, for those of you listening to this who may not be familiar with it, is when you have three phases of strength, or three stages of strength. You have positive, which is raising, static, which is holding, your ability to hold it, and negative, which is the ability to lower a weight. And of those three stages, the final one, negative, is your strongest. If you can curl, for example, 100 pounds, you can probably hold about 110 statically, but you could lower about 140 under control negatively. And the argument being that with negatives, you're stimulating far more growth because you're able to use heavier weights. And I think that's one key, to isolate that heavier weights, yes, because that's increased work in a unit of time. So let's put that one aside. But more to the point, if you look at a negative, the negative per se isn't really inducing much stimulation because the muscles themselves are not contracting against that resistance. They're simply lowering it. They're disengaging. For example, your biceps. If someone lifts a barbell to you on a preacher bench and you slowly lower it, well, your bicep muscle is the fibers are disengaging. They're maximally contracted when it's in the peak position, but they're not contracted at all in the fully extended position. So it is our belief that the most crucial point of negatives and why they are so successful is because A, you take a heavier weight, 40% more than you typically lift. Two people will probably hand it to you, and for about 2 seconds, you are made to contract maximally against that heavy resistance. It's because you have to before you can begin to lower it. And then when you lower it, the fibers disengage until there's no fiber involvement. Then they lift it up, and then you have a maximal contraction, and then disengage. Now this is, mind you, this is a theory. We're not saying that this is a fact, but this is what I think is a very plausible theory. And so our answer to that is that, yeah, negatives are important, but it's probably just that first component of it that really stimulates the growth. And the reason they are important is because they allow you to use heavier weights, not unlike strongest range training.
Now, as I understand it, during the eccentric component, the muscles are stretching. They reach a point of ischemic rigor. There's some damage, and there's compensatory hypertrophy. Is that true? Is that damage necessary to muscle growth?
I'm sorry, is which necessary?
Is the damage necessary to muscle growth? That Z-band streaming that you see?
Well, I don't think damage is necessary for muscle growth. I mean, in fact, the only thing necessary for muscle growth is to make your muscles perform more work in a unit of time. Damage would actually prolong the growth process because the recovery process would have to be prolonged. So, yeah, I mean, there is, when any sort of injury occurs, that's just, and then that's what that is, by the way. It's going to take longer for your muscles to adapt and grow stronger.
And TC, the thing I like to point out when we get into these discussions is something that's a little more pragmatic. We all read with interest the articles that are written on some of the esoterica involved in the physiology of muscle growth, the change in blood gases, the different types of fibers that are stimulated and how they're stimulated. But as a practical matter, when you're in the gym, you can't measure that stuff. You can't draw your blood gases after every set, and you can't, stick your arm in an MRI and see if there's been any kind of a cellular difference generated. So as a practical matter, that power factor measurement is still the most useful thing you have to you. All you need is a logbook and a stopwatch, and you're going to be able to quantify the amount of effort that your muscles put out. Even if you don't know what percentage was fast twitch and which percentage was slow twitch, and which hormones were secreted in what amounts, you won't know that, but you'll know, well, I must be doing something right because I went from 1,000 pounds per minute to 1,300 pounds per minute. So I'm on the right track, even if I can't, stick my body in an MRI machine to verify it.
Okay. Generally speaking, let's define what a partial rep movement is. I mean, is it a third of the movement, or just a few inches, or it varies enormously, or?
It's that one position in the range of motion where you're able to handle the heaviest possible weight. In any exercise involving the upper limbs, it would be the last 2 inches of extension, or contraction in the case of the biceps. For the legs, it would again be the last 2 to 3 inches of extension. If you're on a leg press unit, it's that almost fully extended position, which would be about 2 to 3 inches of play. For overhead press, it's the last 2 inches of extension.
Okay. Now, what kind of people do you have using this routine right now?
We have a pretty broad cross section. Actually, we have we have professional bodybuilders, we have amateur bodybuilders, we have working people, martial artists, physiologists, physicians. It's like most training systems. There's a pretty broad batch of a cross section of people that are engaged in. Anybody who's interested in strength and size.
Well, let's see. I mean, usually the listeners want to hear what pros are using it, if any, or things like that.
We don't have any pros on our payroll, as it were, TC. We largely because we sort of feel like we don't need it.
Okay.
So there are pros that, and people have probably seen our ads, certain quotes that we've used of people that use it, and we're very happy about that. But it's those accolades aren't something that we're trying to purchase by getting somebody on the payroll.
I see what you're saying. But I'm looking at your book here, and I see quotes from Ferrigno and Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates, and there's pictures of Quadzilla in here. Are they using the program or parts of it?
All of them use power factor techniques to some degree. Now, we'd be certainly dishonest to say that they're using the system exclusively and they don't use any other one, because that's not the case. And particularly with professional bodybuilders, as you're well aware, there's other factors that go into building the physique you see there. And certainly not the least of which is chemicals.
Oh, great. Yeah, okay, I appreciate your honesty there.
What's that?
I appreciate your honesty on that point.
Well, that's true. You can't dodge that bullet.
Well, a lot of people try. Okay.
The truth is that training, and that's why our interest is mainly in the realm of strength and size production, away from chemicals, because the chemicals are the great equalizer. I mean, you can go and mix cement, and if you're on enough juice, you're going to develop a pretty respectable-looking physique. And a lot of these bodybuilders are coming up through the old school, where they've been brought up doing that, and it's a real uphill battle to unseat tradition. We found that we were doing some seminars in martial arts academies, and it was surprising because the martial artists don't have any preconceived biases of which is the best way to train, or the way Larry Scott did this, or Lee Haney used to train this way. They don't care about that. They want to know, will I get stronger? Why will I get stronger if I do this? And and what sort of what are the implications in terms of muscle mass? And you explain that to them, and that's great. But with most bodybuilders, it's like you can lay out the whole thing. I mean, this is it. It's empirically validated. You can check your own sources, and this is the way it's done. And but I'd like to be in the gym 7 days a week, and therefore it behooves them to find an inefficient training system where they can justify going into it 7 days a week.
In many ways, it sounds like Mike Mentzer's high-intensity type training, except for the partial reps and the mathematics and the extensive.
You're right. Excuse me. In that respect, Mike Mentzer has taken some heat in the past for saying that there can only be one correct theory for training, to induce muscular hypertrophy. And I think Mike doesn't need anybody to defend him. He's very capable of that. But the point is, he's right. And I think that people misunderstand what he's saying. If I could use an analogy of flight, the Wright brothers came up with the correct theory on how to create enough lift in an aircraft to get it off the ground. They're the guys who did it. That's their theory, which involves aerodynamics and Bernoulli's principle of creating airflow over a surface to lift the wing up. That's the correct theory of flight. Now, other people came along and they made multi-engine aircraft and jet aircraft and helicopters and gliders, but they all use that same principle. You know, the rotors on a helicopter are just wings that are turning around very fast. There's only one correct theory of flight. And similarly, even though there's thousands of different aircraft, there's only one correct theory. In bodybuilding, in muscular hypertrophy, there is only one correct theory, and that is the theory of high-intensity exercise. That's why the sprinter's legs, you know, he's got great big quads, and the marathoner doesn't. The sprinter has high-intensity output in his activity, and that's what generates the muscular hypertrophy. I mean, anybody would recognize this. You would think just latently. You know, if you the whole idea of going in the gym and lifting weights is so that you're engaging in high intensity output. That's what you're trying to do. That's why when you want to build your muscles, you don't go for a walk. You know,
Right.
That's why you go into a gym. That's why they have great big heavy weights in there for you to lift, because high intensity is what you need. That is the correct theory.
Okay, let's.
And all of us are operating on different ways to exploit that theory. Mike Mentzer is at an end of the spectrum that says, you know, what's the minimum I can do to generate growth? You know, one set to failure. That's what's the minimum I can do to generate growth and to stimulate growth and then get out of the gym. Now, we're at a different end of the spectrum, saying, what's the most growth I can get today? What's the most I can get without going over that invisible line where I start overtraining? Well, that's the end of the spectrum we're on. But there's no difference there. It's high-intensity exercise.
Okay.
And the other point on that, too, is that, as Pete said, I mean, or as we touched on earlier, any type of resistance training can be classified as high intensity to the muscles. It really can. And in Mike's example, his perspective is, you know, what is the least amount of work I have to do to get an adaptive response? And there it is, one set. Can't dispute it. One set, get out of the gym. And that will give you some adaptive response in terms of muscle mass. What we're looking for is how can you, every time you go in the gym, stimulate maximum growth? Not just some growth, but maximum growth. And that's why, you know, we gravitate to the heavy partials and infrequent training.
But one system's an airplane and the other system's a helicopter.
I got you.
But, you know, there's no contradiction there.
Okay, makes sense. Hey, let's switch directions just a little bit here. Let's talk a little bit about like diet. Just how much should a bodybuilder be eating to put on muscle, according to your theories?
Well, the diet and nutritional concerns are secondary to the training. I mean, you can have the most perfect diet in the world and the best engineered foods and you know, time your meals and take just the right amount of calories and the right macronutrients and micronutrients. But if you don't train, nothing's going to happen with it. So diet is in our perspective, is relegated to a secondary status. And in fact, as long as you're getting a balanced diet, what used to be called from the 4 basic food groups, and you're not missing out on any vital nutrients that your body needs, then as far as we're concerned, that's all you need, because a well-balanced diet is geared for health, and that also includes the body's repair and growth process.
And adding 10 pounds of muscle really doesn't amount to very many calories. I think there's 600 calories in a pound of muscle. So if you're going to pack on 10 pounds of muscle, you're going to need an extra 6,000 calories to do it. Well, you know, it's not too tough to get 6,000 calories over the period of time that it's going to take to put on the 10 pounds. Even if it happened in a week, adding 6,000 calories in a week is not very difficult to do. So diet is critically important. I mean, there's no question. Without proper nutrition, you'd be dead. So,
okay.
Nobody can take anything away from nutrition.
What about the age-old practice of eating a lot more protein?
Well, that's what I touched on. You know, the muscle is primarily composed of protein. And, how much do you need for 10 pounds of muscle? Well, you need 6,000 calories worth. And, most of that's protein. Well, 6,000 calories, again, it's not an awful lot over, a week or 10 days that it might take you to put on 10 pounds, or 6 months that it might take you to put on 10 pounds. And, as John said, they're both important, but I think what some people don't understand, and I think some of the advertising is a little slanted in this regard. You can take all of the very best supplements, get a perfectly balanced diet. You can even, and listen to what I'm saying because we are absolutely not advocating this, but you could even take anabolic steroids and other hormones. And if you just lay on the sofa, you won't see an ounce of muscle generated. So while the diet is important, nutrition is important, what is equally important is having a well-engineered workout that delivers the kind of stimulation that you need to get that growth to manifest itself. And even steroids won't generate muscle growth of and by themselves. You could juice yourself up to the gills and lay on the sofa, and you won't see an ounce of muscle manifest itself, because the growth has to be stimulated. And our focus is, well, what's the best way to stimulate that growth?
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I mean, you're probably familiar, TC, with a study that was done at Harvard by about 20 years ago.
Guys, before we get into this, let me turn the tape over, okay? Hold on just a second.
Turn the tape over.
All right.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tune in next week for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, if you'd like to check out more classic bodybuilding content, check out my Instagram page at RetroMuscleMags.